Welcome to Calm Down with James Eade. I'm James Eade. Now, everybody's a little bit too uptight these days. Everybody seems to need to know how to calm down. And we talk about that, and it's pretty much a public service. I'm such a nice guy, but I do have an ulterior motive. I want to sell this book to you. This book is called Freedom. It's by the author named James Eade, by me. So I want you to buy it. And the reason I want you to buy it is because it's about addiction and recovery. It's my story. And it doesn't matter how far down you go, when you tell your story, it seems to give help, pass on strength and experience to others. And this is why we want to help each other. And helping each other has turned out to be helpful for me. And when I practice helpful, being selfless service, I find that I get more than I give. So, but getting back to the calming down, we've talked about, I've explained how I use deep breathing, but another technique that we can talk about is humor. And, we had a absolutely tragic kind of, it wasn't tragic because one person was killed, others injured. So it was tragic, assassination attempt, Donald Trump. And I've been using humor because I call Trump Homelander now. And if you've watched the series The Boys, then you know what I'm talking about, who Homelander is. But it's not for the faint of heart. So I don't recommend you watching this series. But when I call Trump Homelander, it can make me smile, make me laugh a little bit. And I call his VP Deep. So you can do it any way you want. And that's one of the ways that I do it. Because the things that are happening in our society today can get so upsetting and can make us turn on each other, which is exactly what we don't want to do. Everybody calls for unity, but we get so upset, we turn on each other. And this is not something that helps anyone. It only hurts us. It hurts us as a country. It hurts us as individuals. So whatever you use, deep breathing, humor, and even, not necessarily in my case, I shared what I do for humor, but you play it by ear because not everybody shares your sense of humor. Not everyone certainly shares mine. But the other thing I wanted to talk about is last week we talked about how shame can hold somebody back, especially if you're dealing in recovery. Everybody either has dealt with addiction or somebody in their family has dealt with addiction because it is a family disease, and we can't look away from it. We can't shut it out and pretend it doesn't exist. It's affecting everyone. It's an epidemic throughout the country. Fentanyl now I didn't even know it existed 10 years ago, and now it's in all sorts of news reports every day. So, and that's just one thing. So it can seem overwhelming, but we can get better. And so my story, the story I tell in Freedom, is meant to give hope. And when we can achieve things beyond getting just clean and sober, we can increase our self-worth, our self-esteem rises, and we can be a better service to our fellow citizens. And this is what this show is really all about, calming down so that you can stay and be your best self. So last time we talked about shame. This time I wanted to talk a little bit about anonymity, because you will be told, if you are like me and you walk into the world of recovery programs, you will hear the word anonymity. That means we don't talk about it except to other addicts, other people in the meetings, and we don't talk about what goes on in the meetings, outside of the meetings. And I have a different view of this, and I just wanted to share it because I learned this from the gay community. It's you don't out anyone. You never do that. But you can be out yourself and be proud of it. So I describe myself as a recovering addict because I have gone through real trials, real dysfunctional problems that really held me down. I felt incomprehensible demoralization. And I'm here to say you can get out of it. You can rise above it. And the steps that you take will depend on you. And it's finding your own path out of it. And so, but if other people tell you we're walking the wrong path, you have to listen and do some internal searching and say to yourself, does that resonate with me? And if it resonates, listen to it. But if it doesn't resonate, keep doing what feels right to you. Your judgment will improve as your recovery gets longer, you get deeper into it. Your judgment will improve and your decision making will improve. And you will learn to trust yourself again. And this is all about building trust in yourself because it is that internal resonance that is our best guide. We know right from wrong if we look inside. It's when we're looking outside and we say, well, it's not written there or written here. It's not posted on the internet anywhere. It can't be true. Or it's posted on the internet that it's not true. And so, no, we don't look outside for answers. The answers are always within. So it's an inside job. And I'm encouraging you because I know that if I could do it, you can do it. The other thing that I wanted to mention before we go into the segments of the show that are pending is that even though we may be egomaniacs with inferiority complexes, part of it is that we were told as a child that we weren't good enough or some other message that was internalized as a child, and we weren't able to shake it as adults because we never articulated it. And I wanted to say that my work with adult children of alcoholics and dysfunctional families is I've only been doing it since last November, and it's really made a difference for me. So there's always keep searching, keep looking for something, and you never know what you need until you hear it. So I'm going to go into the next segment of the show. We have a senior correspondent from LA, Rick Rosner, and Rick Rosner is going to tell us what's going on today in the world of resentments. Thank you very much.
Welcome to this segment of Calm Down, James Eade, where we hear from our senior correspondents from Los Angeles, Rick Rosner. Rick, how are you today?
I'm,
Yeah.
A lot of stuff going on, most of it annoying.
Okay. So, give me one of the things that's in the top 5 list of annoying.
Well, the attempted assassination and the way it played out. I mean, obviously, you have to deplore political violence.
Yes.
And also, specifically, you don't want Trump to get assassinated. Because it's terrible for, what politics is in our country.
Sure.
We don't want to do things that way.
Right.
This is the first president or former president to get shot in 43 years since Reagan in 81. But also, you don't want Trump specifically to get assassinated because it might give the Republicans the opportunity to, replace him as a candidate with somebody that independents might vote for.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, if you were looking, the way it played out, he gets wounded in the ear. We don't know whether it was a bullet or glass from his teleprompter, but a little wound. Then he pops back up and he raises his fists and yells, "Fight, fight!" And now, his people are hailing him as a strong man, and which he's not. He hasn't done a sit-up since the early 1960s. There's a famous clip of him cowering away from an American eagle that was brought in to pose on the cover of Time magazine from him.
Well, they can be scary. To his credit.
Sure, but really, do you want? I mean, go ahead and get pecked or bitten. And all right, it's our national symbol.
Right. Take one for the team. Come on.
Yeah. I mean, if you had
and there would have been some martyrdom too if he had been.
Yeah. So Republicans probably would have voted for his replacement.
Right.
Because he's a martyr.
Right.
So you don't want him to get assassinated or even injured in an assassination.
Right.
I mean, all you might want is, the best outcome would be Secret Service tackles him to the ground, he bonks his head, and he comes up saying nonsense that's even more nonsensical than he said before, and then people question whether he, had brain damage.
Yeah.
But that obviously was not the outcome, and, but I was thinking about all the hours that I and so many other people and hundreds of millions of other people have spent since 2015 worrying about Trump.
Yeah.
and it's at least an hour and a half a day. I spend way too much time on Twitter. I lost 20 pounds because thinking about Trump gives me diarrhea.
Yeah.
And so just on the conservative side, say 500 hours a year times the past 8 years, that's 4,000 hours. That's 2 full years of, a work year is 2,000 hours. And I've spent wasted all that time on that asshole. And the world has, lost time. Like, we made no progress against climate change. If he's elected again, we'll lose another 4 years. He did very little that was good for the nation. He fucked up COVID and cost us, the more years of lost progress. I'm hoping, I'm 64, and I'm hoping medical science figures out new ways to get me extra years of life. And I feel like we maybe under COVID, we lost maybe 18 months of scientific progress. Maybe not. I don't know what happened to science under the lockdown and but I mean, he's probably he's loathed by more people worldwide than any other living person ever. Sure, a lot of people detest Hitler, but I'm not talking about dead people. I'm talking about, we have more people. We have 8 billion people on Earth. Under Hitler, there were maybe, I don't know, 2.5 billion. So just the raw, if everybody, if half the Earth, well, a third of the Earth, 3 billion people, say, have wasted 1,000 hours worrying about what that a-hole is going to do next. Yeah. That's 3 trillion wasted human hours, which is enough to build, I don't know, entire cities, thousands and thousands of Empire State buildings. Yeah. And I hate that my golden years, that are being chewed up. My mom, we lost her at 88 last year. She spent, the last, 7 years of her life under Trump and then under lockdown under COVID. And that's a shitty way to end your life. So anyway, that's what's annoying me, the lost time.
The lost time. Now, what can we do one of the things that I do when I notice that I'm obsessing about something I have no control over, I can't stop this Trump phenomena. I can't believe that America would reelect the guy, but it's possible. It's certainly possible. And, I can get very depressed and even despondent over the possibility. And so I've taken to humor as my self-defense mechanism. And I'm starting to refer to Trump as Homelander. And
who is the evil Superman on the Prime series, The Boys.
Correct. And he's without scruple. He had childhood trauma that he can't get over, so his cruelty, his fascism is unparalleled, except in real life by Trump. And his ability to do damage is second, perhaps, to Trump's.
Let me mention, a couple more things. Mm-hmm. It's extra annoying that, we might reelect a guy who, by every measure, is the shittiest president we've ever had. Presidential historians get surveyed every year or two, and twice they named Trump the worst president in history. And these are experts on the president.
Yeah, I think he finished 4th from last.
So he's been surveyed 5 times. Uh-huh. Worst twice, second worst, third worst, 4th worst.
Right.
Biden, a pretty effective president, has been surveyed twice. Came in 19th best and 14th best. Right.
And during the debate, Trump said that the historians had called Biden the worst president. So it's an outright lie, and it's just projection. He got called the worst. So now he's
Yeah.
calling Biden the worst.
And here's one more thing. I recently read a book called Nuclear War by Annie Jacobson. And this is a Pulitzer nominated journalist who, during COVID, found that it was easy to get people who designed America's nuclear defense program, the whole history of it, guys who are almost 100 years old now. Nobody had anything to do. Everybody was, so they talked. And she found out, she pieced together that our nuclear deterrence has a great potential to end up in a nuclear exchange. Like, one of the most disquieting things is, in her book, she presents a hypothetical where North Korea, run by a madman, launches a nuke at us. And if we're going to respond to North Korea by lobbing a nuke or two back at them, it turns out that if we launch from U.S. missile silos, those missiles have to go over Russian airspace, and Russia doesn't have the technology to tell the difference between a missile aimed at them and a missile aimed at North Korea. And it turns out you can't always get Russia on the phone to explain what's going on. So like the idea that we would put the worst president
signal at the wrong time.
Right. Yeah. The last time we needed to get the Russia on the phone in a crisis, it took more than 24 hours.
Mm.
And the idea that we would put, the least competent president of our lifetimes back in there is frightening and frustrating.
Right.
But also, I turn to humor too. I get on Twitter, and Twitter used to be great for humor. I used to follow hundreds of comedians and read hundreds of jokes a day, and it was nice. And most of them have been chased away by the conditions under Musk, who is Trump, but 20, 30 years later, and in technology instead of casinos. But I try, when I do my anti-Trump tweets, I at least try to find a joke in there somewhere.
Right. So you can steal that if you want to, the Homelander, because my follow-up on that is today he nominated Deep as his vice president.
Yeah.
He had better choices, but
Deep is the boy's version of Aquaman, and he's got gills and is a rapist.
And he's good looking, but his character and intelligence is far below acceptable levels. And
the boys, I mean, it's a good show. It's interesting because it's trying to out the awful politics we have in real life, and it struggles.
It's true. Isn't it amazing that it does? It's beyond parody there, because the real life is kind of worse in some ways.
I just read the second volume of a trilogy by a science fiction writer named Charles Stross.
Okay.
And then it was written in like 2014. And so I went to look for the third volume in the trilogy. He was writing about the near future. There are just a few people that I really like who write about the near future. Neil Stephenson, Cory Doctorow. And
I know
found out that this guy, Strauss, said, sorry, there's going to be no third volume. The present caught up with me. I was writing about the future, but everything I was going to write about has happened. And I'm trying to write about the near future. For years, I've been working on a near future novel. And I get upset about what's going on, but I console myself by saying, well, at least knowing what's going on is research for this stupid novel I'm writing.
Right.
But it is tough to come up with stuff that's crazier than what's actually happening.
Yeah, some of this is beyond belief. And yet We have to accept the fact that this is what we're really living. And there are so many people in absolute denial. You don't think it's possible, but it doesn't matter that there are 34 felony counts against them. It doesn't matter that evidence was introduced into the trial, and the verdict came out from a jury, and it wasn't set
He
up.
had two
Well,
juries.
yeah,
Two juries found him when he was on trial for libel twice.
right.
They found that he had committed digital rape, that he had jammed his fingers into a woman uh, without her consent, just smashed her into the wall of a
And,
dressing room in
and
a
then
department.
badmaster.
Yeah.
And so then he got a $5.4 million settlement against them, and he couldn't shut up.
And then, then he got an $80 million.
And then it was because he couldn't stop. He had no self-control. He couldn't stop bad-mouthing this poor woman. He got sued again, and it turned out to be 80 million. Now I'm wondering if he's shut up, but he's got other troubles now. So, but people will deny all of that. They just won't believe it.
They won't just deny it, but will manufacture stuff against Biden to make Biden seem like the sex criminal.
Right.
Like that he's a perv because he'll sometimes, bend down and kiss a kid on the. Now, it used to be a political cliche, kissing babies.
Yeah.
Heaven forbid you fricking kiss a baby now because you're a pedo. But, Trump, Biden, an old guy, would kiss people on the head, and the Trumpers say he's a hair sniffer. That's his perversion. He likes to sniff people's hair. So it's frustrating.
Yes. Yeah. Well, thank you so much for telling us about your frustrations and the fact that we use humor sometimes to help us cope. When we don't want to give these people that kind of energy, the kind of energy and investment that you had described for us, because they aren't worth it. And it doesn't hurt them. It only hurts ourselves. So the best you can, I think humor is the best medicine. And, I turned him into Homelander. He looks like Homelander. When he was younger, he was handsome, and, so it was, he was tall, or women liked him, so there's a lot of comparisons. But what the most I like is that the utter contempt they have for the rest of the people.
But a warning against the boys is they try to top themselves every week with something disgusting. It's very bloody, not just blood, but just guts, people torn apart, flying limbs. It was started as a comic,
right?
And they try to just make it as graphic as possible. So if that stuff, if you don't have a strong stomach, then
Thank you for that too, because yes, it's obviously something that they thought was funny at the start, but is almost gotten to the point where they're parodying themselves.
It's Seth Rogen's one of the executive producers, and it's a little bit like stoner humor in its excessiveness.
Yes, well done. Okay, thanks again, Rick.
Sure.
And we will see you. Take you off stage now, and want to thank everybody. That was a segment of Calm Down with James Eade with Rick Nosner. And so we're going to continue on with the show, and we'll have Rick come back next week. Hi, welcome to this segment of Calm Down with James Eade. I'm James Eade, and this segment deals with the yamas and niyamas. And I can't tell you that I know enough about them to talk about them. So I have brought a guest on who you may remember, Yudhishthira. Hello again, and good morning to you.
Good morning, Jim.
Yes, and we're talking about the yamas, and we're going down them we've done a couple of shows, a few shows on them already. And today's topic is non-sensuality, brahmacharya, brahmacharya, and why in the heck would I want to be non-sensual?
Well, Jim, it helps sort of to pull out to that really big view of what's going on here, and every single living thing on our planet has a basic impulse to avoid pain and seek pleasure. And I mean, it goes down to single cell organisms.
Sure.
And but we, that is humans alone, have the ability to manipulate our outer environment to skew things in the direction of sensual pleasure. And that's exactly what we have done as a society, which is to say that we have taken things to an extreme in, I was thinking about this at the gym yesterday, that I was looking at the music videos that are up there, and every single music video, with very few exceptions, the star of that program, or whoever they are, is trying his or her best to put out more sensuality than they've ever done before. I mean, that's their goal, to be, and oftentimes it includes sex, but brahmacharya is not about sexuality. That's one of the, it really is not about just that. You can certainly put sexuality in there because it is certainly a very strong impulse in terms of pleasure, but it doesn't limit itself to that. Think about what food commercials look like in our country.
Of course, yes.
Yeah. How much juiciness and how much meatiness and, how much, sweetness, can you pack into a single bite?
Yeah.
And these companies, and whether it's fast food, like a new flavor of Dorito, or a hamburger at a fast food restaurant,
or a car commercial.
Yes, and again, if I buy this car, I'm going to be happy.
Yeah.
And in music, again, it also comes down to, I've mentioned the chakras throughout these shows, and music has gotten increasingly more base oriented, which is the root chakra, earth chakra, and everything is down there in the region, by the way, where a lot of our sensuality originates. So, the reason, for wanting to find more balance in that situation is a reason for practicing non-sensuality or brahmacharya. So does that make any sense to you at all?
What I got out of what you're saying is that we're looking for balance, and that we can be stuck in a particular mode of operation, such as a root chakra based sensuality, and we want to change our vibration to rise above that, and not to abandon it, but to blend it in a way that serves our whole being rather than an aspect of our being. How's that?
And I would say yes, that is certainly a good beginning look at brahmacharya. And I say a beginning look because of the fact that I think you used the right word, and maybe I use it as well, balance, which is a better look at things. But that is also only just the beginning of brahmacharya. And to say that it's helpful to begin to find some sort of a less stimulating version of your life, I mean, we know one another well enough. That I live in an Ananda community.
Right.
Ananda, by the way, is a English derivation of a Sanskrit word that means inner joy. And so when one comes to an Ananda retreat or meditation group or community or temple, one of the fundamental underlying principles that everybody here sort of has bought into is simple living and high thinking. And it's a powerful combination, and it's a good general guide to how do you live your life. And the people who you are surrounded with, to a large influence, or to a large degree, are going to influence your own thinking, your own behavior. So if you have everybody around you who is focused not on denying the pleasures of the world, but rather on finding ways to have those senses, and the 5 senses that we all have, to find a way to engage those in, so that visually you are seeing beauty around you.
I'm starting to catch on.
Yeah, when you're listening to music, you're listening to music that ends up leaving you with a sense of peace in your heart, not overstimulation in your body. That when one begins to simplify one's life, it means that people can have a meal together rather than eating at a fast food restaurant. So these are just some simple examples, and it is, in one broad sense, a group of people practicing simple living and high thinking, or brahmacharya, together.
Yes. And I think I've mentioned before, it's like the idea of sex, drugs, and rock and roll getting me as high as possible in an ecstatic state, which is non-sustainable. And the stillness, the peace and calmness that I have found practicing the yoga techniques and practicing the yogic philosophies, this is more sustainable. And this seems to me, the calmness and stillness is part of what we're talking about. Is that?
It is true. And
Okay.
Let me make clear, in terms of sex, drugs, and rock and roll, I have a little storage locker in my consciousness where I keep sex, drugs, and rock and roll. And periodically I open it up and go visit and say, oh, that was fun. And then I close the door and go back to my current life.
Right.
And, because we don't have these extreme experiences without the potential for some value being there in them. And if nothing else, they give you some sort of a line in the sand that you can define where you don't want to go there any longer. And it's not to say that what's on the other side of the line was bad or evil or
should
wrong.
be regretted even. Right.
Right. And so the thing about brahmacharya that is so challenging for people is that it so often is identified, again, with sensuality and sexuality and celibacy. And traditionally, that's how yoga was taught. But in modern yoga, and I say modern in the sense that they're during the last, 1,000 years or so, and for all of my teachers, Swami Kriyananda, who founded Ananda, Yogananda, honestly, brahmacharya is not about sexuality, non-sensuality, it's celibacy. It's not about any of those things. And that's a little bit hard. But I want to, before I go quite there, I want to say that one of the touchstones for every one of these yamas and niyamas is going to come back to the practice of meditation. Because meditation, whereas we have that one line in the sand that was about sex, drugs, and rock and roll on the other side, all right, here we have meditation, which establishes not only not a line, but rather a doorway. And in meditation, that doorway leads to what is called in yoga, here's another good yoga word, pratyahara. Now, pratyahara is one of the stages of yoga, and it means that we have successfully, through meditation, and it can happen spontaneously, but usually we have to work to get there. But through meditation, we have learned to withdraw those 5 energies that we call the 5 senses, bring them inward. And every one of those 5 senses has an inward experience. And let me give you a couple of examples.
Okay.
That when one begins to meditate, the sense of sight, that is the physical eyes, becomes localized at the point between the eyebrows where there is light that we see in a particular pattern, easily predictable, widely experienced by people who know nothing about yoga,
Mm-hmm.
and it's called the spiritual eye, and that is light, or Jyotish. And sound, when we get very still in meditation, the sound that we hear is an inner sound of Om. And again, we mimic that sound by chanting Om, and we
Right.
do it as a way of moving us in the direction of actually experiencing it.
Right.
There is also a sense of taste and a sense of smell. Many saints of all traditions, nothing about yoga, that people around them will relate to the saint having a particular aroma, often of roses.
Mm-hmm.
I just finished a beautiful book called Padre Pio and I. Just an absolutely glorious little book. And this Padre Pio being a Roman Catholic saint, and he transcended the church. It had nothing to do with the Catholic Church. He was present with the divine continuously, and his student spoke about this thing. But so all these five senses have an inner experience when we withdraw our energy inward, and meditation is usually the way that we get there.
Yeah. Thank you so much. I understand so much better now.
Good.
So, but I think you've got more to say.
Well, I have a little bit to say, and again, it again goes to this idea that how do we begin to practice brahmacharya? I think we've talked about maybe why we might want to, and because when we begin to practice brahmacharya, certain things we begin to experience certain things. The mind will tend to say, "Oh, I have found this," and that is absolutely not the reality. Not a bad thing to go to feel, but if we have simplified our lives, withdrawn our senses inward, we tend to experience certain qualities: calm,
Right.
calmness, peace, a more universal aspect of love, where we stop judging people. And all this simply requires that we withdraw our attention from the outer world and turn our attention inward. And so one of the reasons that people might want to practice brahmacharya is because by removing your attachment to the outer world, what you are removing is not simply attachments. You're removing obstacles. It's like going into a room with many mirrors, and every mirror is dirty in a different way. Or the speakers that are in that room have a lot of static. Or there's a bad smell in the room. And if you clean the mirrors, make the connections better, remove the source of the bad smell, what you're going to find is that everything is more clear. You can see yourself more clearly. What you hear sounds sweeter. And what it comes down to is that we have not changed who we are. We remove things that are not pleasing to us, not true to our nature.
And they do not serve.
And they definitely do not serve.
Right.
And so what happens when we begin to meditate is that the senses naturally begin to withdraw. Now, I will mention this probably many times, and I have before, that it does not always require meditation for someone to have an experience of this.
Right.
Because there are oftentimes moments in our lives, places where we are, where this can occur spontaneously for us. So, for example, people oftentimes are in nature, at the ocean, on the mountain, in the forest, in the desert. And in those experiences, they can oftentimes find a level of stillness where everything tends to stop.
Yes. Because people have told me that their higher power is nature or their higher power is the ocean. And I think that they're tuning into just what you're talking about now.
Exactly. And you know what? If that is the way that they are able to successfully get there, I'll tell you, my sister lives in the middle of Missouri.
Mhm.
You can tell I'm from Missouri because I just said Missouri. But my sister lives on, way out in the middle of the rural midst of Missouri countryside. She has horses and animals in her barn, and she has not found her way to meditation in the same way I have. She's certainly aware of mine, but what she does in the evening, and she goes up to her barn, sits down on the barn floor with her back against the wall, and closes her eyes and gets still.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
And that is a beautiful example
Absolutely.
that doesn't require anybody studying anything about yoga,
Right.
to come to that particular moment.
Right.
I wanted to the actual practice of brahmacharya for most people ends up being one of self-control. And if you want an illustration of the problem, anybody who has ever set out, by the way, drug and alcohol addicts are the extreme example of this, but they're only an extreme example because everybody, well, not everybody, but many people tend to have the same challenge. It's just with a different substance.
Mm-hmm.
Food is oftentimes a big one.
Of course.
People oftentimes will find themselves not feeling well, overweight, feeling lethargic, and they will realize they want to change their diet. And they realize they're taking in too much fat, too much salt, too much sugar. And so they decide, well, I'm going to not eat any sugar today. And this is their voice, the voice, and it sounds reasonable at 8 o'clock in the morning.
Mm-hmm.
But about 2 o'clock in the afternoon, they realize that they're not feeling quite so energetic as they did at 8 a.m.
Yes.
And you could apply coffee or tea to this.
What? Yeah. So many substances, right?
And so suddenly at 2 o'clock, a different voice comes into your head and says, you deserve, you've been so good.
Yeah.
You deserve one cup of tea or 1 cup of coffee or one little sweet thing. Yeah. And of course, that 1 cup of coffee becomes 3. The 1 piece of chocolate becomes 6. And so it goes. So self-control is really the issue here. And it requires the same voice throughout the day. Again, that's where meditation can really come in handy, because meditation is not something to say, I'm going to meditate in the mornings and that's it.
Mm-hmm. Better
to meditate 5 minutes in the morning, 5 minutes mid-morning, 5 minutes at noon, and so on throughout the day. It's much, much more effective. But, are we doing okay on time?
We're hitting the end of where I'm comfortable, okay. So we should